Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today is Seabass, and our podcast is presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. Thank you also to our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. The news is presented by Sutherland and Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These are folks who'll shoot you straight on your rights and options. When you've been injured in an accident, call them 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt has a 3-game baseball set with Illinois State this weekend. Those games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Next week, Vanderbilt will get into regular season play in the SEC. They'll go to Texas A&M for a weekend series. Joining us now, my buddy Seabass from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. My friend, is this the day we do the Padres podcast? Is that what we're doing today?
Man, let me put it to you this way. At this point, I'm about ready to do a political podcast before I did a Vanderbilt podcast, and you know how much I love politics.
I had to call you to make sure you hadn't slit your wrists.
Let me just say this to all the listeners from last week. I apologize. Even though it wasn't my fault, I still apologize because I was close to my wit's end, and I'm not going to do that again today. It's worse than it was last week, but nobody wants to hear that, and I'm not going to do that again. I'm not. I believe in telling the truth, but we all know what the truth is, so I won't lament the entire time, I promise.
Well, we're only as good as the material.
Oh, well, if we're as good as the material, I'm hanging up now.
There's some level of appropriateness of what is going on in the background, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Metaphors abound, my friend.
Should we just leave it at that?
We probably should.
Oh, hey, I think the fan base needs a laugh about this time.
We need something because I've never been here before, Chris. This is a new low for me, and I'm from Memphis.
Oh, the attendance figures are terrible. People are voting with their feet, and I don't know that I've ever seen a coach have a fan base lose confidence in him as much as was the case between last night and Thursday afternoon when we're doing this show.
What else could we do as fans? We have nothing else. We have to speak out. I mean, we can wish on a star all day long, and there's some folks on there that are, on the board and the fan base that are still. They're gonna say, don't say anything negative and be positive for the school if you love them, and if you don't love them, if you love them, you won't say anything bad. Let me tell you something. If you love them, you'll say it when it needs to be said. It needs to be said, guys. Come on. You don't love Vanderbilt any more than we do. But something has to happen. We can't just sit back and say, well, we love VU, so we'll just take whatever we get. That's stupid.
Well, what needs to be said, just from your point of view?
What? You want me to come out and say it? Rush Drew has to go. He has to go. I don't care about the money, people, and how they think we're ungrateful we are. Let me tell you something. Live in the real world. There's not a fan base on this planet that would be okay with this. Not one. Every last one, 100% of them would bellyache just the way we are right now because it was an utter embarrassment. And here I go on a soapbox, and we ain't even been in it 5 minutes. I'm already doing what I said I wouldn't do. You know what time it is. I don't want to hear about all these other things about just give it time. Give it time? Let me tell you something. Picture yourself in Memorial Gym 9 months from now with Bryce Drew as the head coach right now and 1,000 people at the game. Because that's where you're headed. Unless, now I'll tell you what, you tell me, I'll just sit back and I'll listen. Tell me what we're building on. Tell me what I'm clinging to. Give me something to hold on to. outside of Aaron Neesmith. Give me something to hold on to.
Well, I'm bigger on Saban Lee than you are. I think that you can explain some of that maybe by the fact they're having to play almost all the minutes. I think they're better players than that. Now, can they build a supporting cast around them? I don't know. It hasn't worked yet. But if you want something to grab onto, I think that Aaron is an outstanding player, and I think Saban's a pretty good one.
Aaron deserves better than what he received this year. He's a heck of a player, and he's a heck of a competitor. And I like Saban Lee a lot. He's quick. He's aggressive. He makes mistakes, but he is just a sophomore, and I certainly get that. But if you put it all together, Chris, this is a team that is so overmatched in almost every conceivable way, and I don't know what I'm supposed to cling to. You know, I've watched a very average, and I think I'm being kind by that, 15-14 Arkansas team come in. We go 20 minutes, half of a basketball game without a made field goal. That shouldn't be possible. There are high school teams that could have at least made one bucket at home against Arkansas in 20 minutes. What was on the line? Keeping yourself from having a losing home record at Memorial Gym, which is something what we have. Is it never done, Chris? Is that the case?
Never until last night.
Ever. And now you're 0-17 going into Baton Rouge, and I have a feeling LSU might be favored in that game.
That's a team with issues of its own. How fitting.
You know, I'm only saying these things because I do love this program. I do love this university. You know that I do. I don't have to prove my love to this school. But when is it enough? When will you sit back and say, okay, dude, we have finished 13th and 14th in the SEC in the last 2 years. This is after a year in the program. The last 2 years have been, two of the three worst seasons in the history of the program?
I think it's the two biggest loss seasons in the history of the program. Now, I get that they play more games, and so that's factored in. But it is what it is. I mean, you shouldn't be in that point. Look, I know the reasons they are not a good team. There's no reason they should be as bad as they are. None.
Do you know how bad it hurts me not to care? You know how bad it sickens me to turn on the TV and just think about watching something else instead? I didn't think I could feel that way about Vanderbilt athletics in any sport. I don't care what it is. And I watch that team, and it just makes me sick at my stomach. It just makes me sick watching that basketball team to where that program has become. And now I'm supposed to believe that if we can just give them the offseason, we're going to rally around and everything's going to be fun. Hey, I hope that's true. I hope they win the national championship next year. And then they call me up and say, Seabass, you're an idiot. You don't know nothing. You don't love this program. That would be wonderful. I hope that happens. But I am out of hope, and I'm out of defense for this program. I don't have any more. The fact that Bryce Drew is a nice guy means nothing, except the fact that he's a nice guy that you would love for your son to play for. But that's not what we're doing here. This is an SEC program, and we're talking about its level of competition. We don't have any. This would be a bad OVC team, Chris, a bad OVC team. I got nothing left. Now, you can say whatever you want. I said my piece. I don't have anything left to say about it.
You know, the weirdest thing about last night was it was so bad I didn't see the worst, I don't think. This is what I mean by that. Here's my routine. I go to the game. I write a national story of about 350 words that I send off, and it gets sent to like Reuters and some places like that. So if you ever read the Reuters game story and it's a Vanderbilt home game or even a road game, sometimes that's me that does that. Then I have to write another story for my site. The one that I write for Reuters is more middle of the road, although last night that was such a disaster. It kind of read like, this is how bad Vanderbilt was, because honestly, from my point of view, that was the story. Then I write my own story for my site. So with about a dozen minutes left, they're down 15 or whatever it was. It may have been 20. But I'm like, there's no way they're coming back. I've seen this too many times. I mean, they might make a run, but they're not going to win. So I'm like, I'm thinking at that point, I've got two stories to write, and I've got a press conference to go to in between. which I will video and put up on the site. So that's a lot to do. And then I've got to get home and help my wife with the kids the next day. And you start really dwelling a lot of time on writing, and it can get to be pretty quickly 11 o'clock before you leave in that gym. And it's 30 minutes for me to get home. So here's my point. I knew where that game was going, and I started writing before the worst part. I don't think I even saw most of it, but man, my board sure did.
See, Chris, I hate like the words that I just said a minute ago. I hated even stomaching them, and saying them. I know nobody wants to hear that, and I don't want to say them, but I don't know what else to do. What else are we supposed to say now, Chris, at this point? You cover that program every day. I do it for my show, and of course, I love the program. I don't know what else to say. Should I be an ostrich and just pretend like everything's okay because I love the Doors and go Bryce? Really? I'm tired of this. And the worst part of it all, I'm sitting there looking to my left and I'm watching Rick Barnes pull a second straight 5-star player, probably going to get a 1 seed in the country, and it has an excellent chance of playing for a national championship. And I'm watching my beloved program, and the season was supposed to be the greatest, just go beyond down the toilet. Chris, it would be irresponsible of me if I just sat back and said, go Doors. I said before this podcast started that I was going to just sit back, but good Lord, Chris, I don't know how. I don't know how to contain myself when it comes to this because it matters that much to me.
This is about as patient a fan base as you'll find. I think they flipped the switch last night. The texts that I was getting, the texts that people close to the program that I know were getting, it was like they lost 10 games at once last night.
Can I tell you what I was picturing last night? No kidding. I was picturing some young 20-year-old in the ticket office or and those in charge of trying to sell season tickets next year, making those phone calls and actually having to pick up the phone and make these phone calls and what they would say when they were bombarded with the responses that are coming, deservedly so. Can you imagine that job? What would you say?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your feedback.
I don't know what else there is. I mean, I say I know the answer. I mean, I'm just going to ask you, Chris, how, if Bryce Drew is allowed to come back and coach this team next year, as fans, you do this for a living every day. Give me something. Tell me something that I can cling to if Bryce Drew is allowed to come back as the head coach of this football team next year. Give me something.
Well, first of all, according to you, he's just switched sports. So there's that.
What'd I say, football?
Yes.
See what's going on? You see what's happening? See what's happening, Chris?
Right. No, sorry. I just, that's kind of me. I try to find humor and stuff when it gets like this. But
believe me, it's fine.
Okay. In all seriousness, here's the case. As much as they look like morons, I don't think they're as dumb as they look right now. That's not a real strong point to start your statement with. I understand that. You asked me to build a case, so I am. I think they got 2 players I really like. If you can somehow land an immediately eligible transfer or grad transfer, which there are those guys, as we have seen in football, Vanderbilt becomes a much more attractive destination the closer you get to finishing. I think Matt Ryan's got to be better. I think Yanni Wetzel is a piece who can help them in spots. Ejike Obinna has supposedly gotten better. So I don't think that it's hopeless if you can add a couple more players. Now, look, you still have the same staff coaching them. Unless they learn a lot of new tricks, it isn't going to matter. But if you want both sides of the story, there it is.
I asked for something and you gave me something. And if all those things work out, because think about this. Think about how much harder it is. Just think about how hard it is to improve, let's say, 5 games on the conference in a conference season from one year to the next. That's a big improvement. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and you beat me to the next thing. What I was going to say is they could be a lot improved, and they could go 6-12 or 7-11 in the league, and I don't think that really has solved anything for anybody. This is kind of like the discussion we had with Derek Mason. I said I think he needs to have a winning season because if he doesn't, that's going to be hanging over his head, and it still is. Now, I think, are people pleased with some progress he made? Yes, but they still haven't had a winning season. And we said going in that we thought 2019 would be rough. Now, the dominoes have aligned in a way that I don't think any of us could have imagined a couple of months ago. I still think it's going to be a struggle for them to have a winning season. And if 2019 is that way, then you're going into 2020 with 6 of those in a row. Now, Bryce isn't nearly as far along down that path, and I think people forget too easily. He did go to the tournament 2 years ago and won 11 games in the conference. So there is that. But it starts to become the same thing. It's like, well, if you don't think he can get the job done and he wins 6 or 7 next year, what is that really proving to anybody?
Exactly. Nothing.
The hope that I had for them is I thought they could still add some big pieces. With the Kessler or somebody, I just think it's a really tough sell now. As I told you before, I did not think that the Garland injury would wreck their season. I thought that most reasonable people would understand why they didn't become the team that we thought they could become. And the truth is, I think if they win 4 or 5 games this year, people are like, okay, it's not what we wanted, but I understand how they got to that point. When you don't win any, you don't have that argument anymore. I think if he had just won a few games, I think if he'd quit dwelling on Darius Garland, which I think has wrecked their team chemistry from what I'm hearing to some degree, I think that's a different story. Then I think that they are given a plausible explanation for this year. They can sell that to recruits. They can say, hey, look, this was going to be our year. It's not. But if we get more players like you, then we can reload and maybe we'll be okay for 2019 and maybe really good in 2020. That's a much harder sell. This is sort of falling into that disaster that you would not have given a 1 in 100 chance of happening before the season. And when you get in that territory, it's kind of like all bets are off.
And now you mentioned Kessler. Johnson, I know Johnson said that this didn't really have much of an effect on what's going to happen in regards to his recruiting. But I think we thought going into the season there was a very good chance that both of those pieces were going to be in black and gold, and now we'll be fortunate if one of them is.
Oh, I had predicted back around New Year's Day that they would both end up at Vanderbilt. I don't think either of them will right now, and I would have some reservations about taking Keon Johnson based on seeing him play. Nothing to do with the ability. That kid got 2 technical fouls the night I saw him play. I've done some checking around. That was not an atypical type of night for him. They've already got one chemistry issue on this team this year with one highly regarded player. This staff has not handled that well. Just for argument's sake, let's say they get Keon Johnson, which I don't think they will, but let's say they do. I would have some concerns there. He could, in the blink of an eye, grow up and mature. But with what we know about this year and how that's gone, I don't know how you feel good about even that.
And the problem is, outside of those, I mean, we're looking for difference makers, game changers, and how many of those are they linked to at this point in the game, the way that things have turned out? Are there any others?
Not that I know of. Again, I would like to see the transfer market, what that's like, if they can get somebody. Because say you get a Player of the Year of the Missouri Valley Conference or something like that. I'm not thinking of anybody in particular. I'm just throwing something out there. Say you can get that type of transfer of a kid who's maybe a 3.8 student and probably not an NBA guy, but can help you at the college level. If you can land a guy like that, another good supporting player, then again, with those other guys, maybe you got a chance. And if you can fix some chemistry issues, this is the best case scenario. Now, I think that is the chances of that happening seem to be becoming less by the minute. But again, we didn't think this was going to happen, so who knows? Changing the subject, I guess it could be worse. They could have hired Will Wade, who, did you catch the news on LSU today?
No, I have been on the go, so I haven't had a chance. In fact, after the podcast, I was going to delve into that before I hit the air tonight. I haven't seen the latest.
Well, they have a transcription of Will Wade basically talking about getting money to middlemen or parents, or so it sounds, and it is it is not a good look for him.
Oh, well, no, it's not. It's not a good look for college basketball, period. And I wonder now. There's anything we would say would be pure speculation. How different do you think he is from most coaches? Not all of them, obviously. Some people run a clean program, but he just happened to get caught. What do you think he is? You just think he's one of many, or he just this is a rarity? Most coaches are not like this, and he got burned.
Well, it's just breaking that Creighton and TCU apparently are getting caught up in that scandal. So what does that tell you?
Creighton? Blue Jays?
Yeah.
Tells me people want to win really badly. Really, really badly. I will say this. That part about Bryce, I certainly appreciate, because I know he's not going to have me there. I know that my team is not going to end up in that situation with him as my head coach. And that part I do appreciate. He is a good man. I don't have anything against him personally. And I want a clean program. I don't want to make a Faustian deal. I don't want to do that. I want to find somebody who can win, do it the right way, and get the most and maximize out of their players. That's all I'm asking for.
Do you want to talk baseball?
Yes. I'd rather talk anything at this point than that, yes.
Well, did you get a chance to watch them this week? Would you like to ask me questions? We've done the role reversal thing here before. We could do that.
Yeah. First of all, one thing that I was really glad to see, and I know a lot of people aren't in love with middle of the week baseball. I get all that. But, man, did the bats come back a lot to life or what?
That is a good stinking lineup, man. Those kids can hit.
Tell me about Cooper Davis.
Well, Cooper Davis has got a nagging injury, it would seem, but I like the way he can go to different fields. He can lay down the bunt. He is really fast. He's a good defender. That was one of those things that when they put him in the lineup, sometimes Tim does that, throws you a little bit of a curveball, and that was a little bit of a curveball because he had mentioned Cooper Davis. I wasn't surprised when he got the opening day start. And sometimes it's a guy that he falls in love with in practice and it doesn't translate. It is all translated with that kid so far. I mean, the top of their order right now, okay, how do you pitch these guys? Because you got him, then you got Austin Martin, then you got J.J. Bleday, who, by the way, has found the power that all the scouts said they thought he had. He hit a ball, Seabass, on Wednesday, and it was 38 degrees. It was off a lefty slow tosser, a sidearm kid, and I bet it went 420 feet. I mean, it was over the bleachers. You could see it bouncing in the parking lot back there. I mean, it was at least 410, I would think, because it was over the 375-foot mark, and then how many ever feet the bleachers would be behind that, not to mention that the top row is, 15, 20 feet off the ground. So he hit a long way. Behind him, you got Scott, who's hitting well, but not to the level that he can hit yet. Same with Clark. Doing okay, but he's not the Philip Clark that we've seen. I've gone blank at who they're hitting in the 6 hole. Oh, DeMarco, who's not going yet, but is starting to a little bit. And then they got Paul in the 7 spot. I mean, those 7 guys right there, I don't have really any concerns about them. I mean, it's just varying levels of are they solid or are they good or are they great, like all SEC level great. Any of them could be that guy. They've not gotten a lot out of third yet. Jason Gonzalez is striking out a lot, but his approach is better. And Infante, we got our first look at him on Wednesday. He's not hitting the ball. He's not driving the ball, but he's making contact. His pitch selection, I think, is a little better in terms of what he takes swings at, and he's at least putting the bat on the ball. No, he's not hit it anywhere yet, but I think that Gonzalez and Infante, and what little I've seen, are showing better approaches at the plate. Gonzalez, well, both those kids have got massive power. Like after Steven Scott and maybe an Albalade, although I'd probably rank those 2 guys both ahead of him, tremendous raw power. If those 2 kids, one or both of them, put it together, holy cow, look out. He's speechless, ladies and gentlemen. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I had it on mute. Leave that on there. It's funny. That's funny right there. So I'm guessing that, maybe the Austin P game was maybe it's what this team needed, you think?
Maybe. I was thinking that Wednesday because their approach was different. I thought in the Austin P game, I thought they left Huff in too long. I thought they didn't leave Rocker in long enough after he threw 3 strikes to get him out. I'm a big proponent, and maybe if I sat in the dugout and made the calls, I would look like a moron. Wouldn't surprise me. But I'm always a proponent if a guy is throwing well, don't mess with it. And Scott Brown sometimes is prone to taking out guys who are throwing well and leaving in guys who are not throwing well. And that has cost them many a game in recent years, and I thought it cost them the game against Austin P. I thought they realized they had a team that could hit in ETSU, which those cats can hit. They didn't mess around. They left guys in when it was an 8-run lead at the end. They got Franklin in to get him, I guess, a better restart to his season after that rough game to start the year. But they had an 8-run cushion in that point. I liked the way they managed that game much better than I did the one they lost to Austin P last week.
Make sure I got those numbers. Did we break a record, an NCAA record this past week with 11 teams ranked in this conference?
My buddy New York Door mentioned that on the podcast on Tuesday. I have not checked on that. I mean, I would presume he has his facts right that 11 teams are ranked. I would have to think that's a record. I don't know who else would have beaten it. I mean, the ACC has got 16 teams, but one thing about the ACC, you can always count on 3 or 4 teams being really bad. I think if there's 11 teams legitimately in the poll, that would be a record.
And the reason that I ask that is because if that's the case, from what you've seen of this team, are we the best team in that conference? If there's 11 ranked teams, there's going to be a lot of pitfalls between here and the end of the regular season. Do you feel comfortable that we're equipped to handle that?
Oh, I think so. I think the lineup itself is good enough. Again, I have some issues with the pitching, but there's a lot of talent there. I think they've been throwing better. They're striking out a ton of guys. Now, I think that you have some teams, I think that Tennessee is better than anybody expected. The Vols always give them a tough series. And I have not seen the other teams play yet. In fact, I haven't seen Tennessee, but I've followed the stat sheet. And what their pitching is doing is incredibly impressive. And I liked the way that they played last year when they played Vanderbilt in that series. I didn't think they had a lot of talent in the bottom end of their order. And their pitching staff was limited, but they played hard. They were, I thought, well coached. I think as those kids have gotten more experienced and another year in his system, they're a pretty good team. I'm anxious to see how it unfolds. The Florida series and the A&M series, to me, will be interesting. A&M because it's the first time Vanderbilt's played on the road, and there's a lot of people think that's a pretty talented program. Rod Childress every year is pretty good. A&M's always a top 25 caliber team. A lot of people thought they might be this year too. And then Florida. I know Florida's taking its lumps in the midweek, but that team hit the tar out of the ball last weekend, which is kind of a question. They turned over a lot of hitters in that lineup, and you know they give Vanderbilt fits. They know how to get under those kids' skin like nobody else. I don't care if they play that game in Nashville, in Gainesville, on Mars. Nobody gets under their skin like Florida. So I'm really anxious to see the next 2 weekends of baseball once they start conference play, which will not be this weekend, but next.
The unranked teams were who? Was it Missouri, Alabama, and
Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky I believe,
Kentucky? Yeah. Kentucky would be the only other team unranked. Yeah, it was never, and that question was never about whether or not the lineup can do its thing. I totally expect that to be the case. There's more along the lines of the rotation, especially the bullpen and its consistency. When you play a series, and I don't have the schedule in front of me, but if you have like a series, you've got LSU one week, and then you've got Georgia right after that, you've got Tennessee, and then South Carolina, and then Florida, and then Ole Miss. Will this pen hold up? How long will they use? Because one of the issues that I've always heard you talk about is the usage, either not leaving in people long enough or leaving them in too long. That's the type of thing that's going to be key with and this is, look, it's SEC schedule baseball. It's always tough, but maybe more so this right now than ever, and I'm just wondering if this pen is capable of holding up to that.
The sheer number of arms they have there lends it to me thinking that it could. I think I trust King. You've been able to trust Gillis in spots, but he's never put it together for a whole season. Fisher and Eder are super arms. Eder looks to me like he's a lights-out closer, but there's always the control piece. Fisher, again, really skilled guy, probably even bigger control issues there. Ethan Smith has impressed a lot of people, but he's a freshman. Don't know for sure what we're going to get with him yet. Tyler Brown, I'm starting to trust more. He's not getting hit as hard. He always is good about being around the zone, which I like. I loved what they got from Austin Becker this week, but it's one outing against a team that was horrible that day. Mason Hickman, good arm. Probably not going to no-hit you for 7 innings, but I think he's going to give you innings and he's going to throw strikes. I presume Kumar Rocker's going to be in the rotation, but who knows? I'm sure I'm missing a name or two here or there that we need to talk about, but my point is there's a lot of talent there, but it's not like, let's say, the 11 team where you had Will Kleinert and Corey Williams. There's just been some pins where you could identify 4 or 5 arms that you knew what you were getting more so than with this bunch. But the sheer number of arms on this staff, I think, is greater than anyone I've seen Tim have.
He's going to need it. That's the thing. He's going to need it with a schedule like this. What do they have coming up this week?
They've got Illinois State, which really stuck it to Belmont over the weekend. I think Belmont's just an awful team, so I don't know what to make of that. And then next week, I have Samford next week. And Samford is a team that's consensus picked to win the SoCon. So the good news for that one is they don't have a Wednesday game there, because that's a staff that you might want to save your best 5 or 6 arms for that you're going to use in relief, because you might need them. You might need every one of them to win that game. And then they go to A&M.
They go to A&M to start off conference play.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sweet, man. What else for baseball?
I want to circle back to something you said about having 11 teams in the top 25. And look at the 3 that aren't there. Missouri's got Cameron Misner in center. He might be the top hitting prospect, or maybe the top overall prospect in the league this year. for the MLB draft.
Really?
I mean, he could get picked in the top 10. He's a power speed guy. No, he didn't stay healthy a year ago. You got Kentucky, which I know Aaron Fitt really liked that bunch preseason. They got some talented arms. They've got the lefty that can't stay healthy that a lot of people think is best pitcher in college baseball if he's healthy. I don't know why I'm going blank on his name, but I have. And then Alabama, I think, is getting better. That's been a situation where it's been unstable down there for a while. They've been through, 3 coaches in 4 years or something like that. It seems like they played well early. I don't think they're a very talented team, but it seems like they're well coached. My point being is that's 11 teams in the top 25, and you got something with the other 3 that you can say, hey, this is a bright spot here. I just think it's a brutal league like it usually is.
What do you make of Tennessee's defense and pitching so far? And they're not giving anything up.
I don't know what their fielding numbers have been, but the last I checked, they had a strikeout to walk ratio, and this was about a week ago, of like 7-1, and that was after the Indiana series. And let me tell you, Indiana most years is a regional team. It's like a 2 or a 3 seed. So you sweep Indiana, you shut those guys down. I don't know if this is still the case, but like as of a game or 2 ago, I think they had more wins than they had runs that they'd given up. I think they were 10-11-0 and had given up, 7 runs. I don't know what it's been this week, but that's incredible. Like, it's hard not to give up a run by almost by accident, even if you're playing a terrible team.
Right. I don't care who you're playing. That's unfortunately, that's very impressive. And so I just wondered if you thought they were legit.
Now, they have done this, I don't know how many times. They've started hot and just really fallen apart when the season hits. But I've heard good things about their coach. And again, I look to that strikeout walk ratio. When you were that efficient with your pitching, you can be a tough team for anybody to beat usually.
Right. That's a good point. Man, woo! But you know what? This is good. This should make for a great SEC conference season. But let me ask you something real quick, because I've had a chance to watch a couple of games, and one thing that I did not see was a lot of people at the game. You think this is weather? You think that's what it is? It's just the fact that you're not seeing huge competition this early on. Surely there's no reason to worry about that for baseball. This is the number 1 ranked team in America.
No, I don't think that's a big concern. Most of these games, it's 30-something degrees. It's been windy. A lot of times you don't see the sun all day. Look, you know how much I like to watch baseball? I would not have been out there in the stands if I were them. I mean, that's more than I would have done. I get to go in the press box. Heck, it's cold in the press box sometimes. I don't want to – I would not be out there. So I don't think that's a big deal.
Right, and I completely understand. It bared asking, man. It bared asking because I saw it and I was like, man, that's this is the number 1 team in America. Why? Where is everybody? But I'm like you, who wants to sit out there in 30-degree weather in a game that honestly, at the end of the day, is not going to mean a whole heck of a lot. So, just wanted to make sure there's not an issue in regards to that.
Well, not just that, but there's been a lot of game time changes. The working guy who might be able to make it to the ballpark by 4:30 this week is out of luck, because they moved the games to 1 and 2, and then you've had so many that have been changed around by rain. You had a series against Pepperdine 2 weekends ago where they moved up first pitch to 9 Sunday morning. Well, there's a good bit of the fan base that's in church at that time. So I think there's some extenuating circumstances.
Fantastic. Hope it ends up being a good week of baseball for the Commodores. A couple things here. One, anything you want to talk about on football? I know they've been on break, but they've gotten back started now. Anything of note at this point?
There's nothing to talk about. We're not getting access to this point. And besides, they're on spring break this week anyway. I don't think they come back till – No, it's this week.
So they practiced all week last week because there were no reports at all of any kind.
No, but they started practice on Wednesday. So they went Wednesday, I think, and Friday. We had a report Wednesday from what we could watch, which was 20 minutes and some notes that I made about who was there and who wasn't and position switches. And then Friday they had a practice and closed it off. I don't know if they practiced Thursday night, but I don't think they did. So just not much there.
All right. One last thing. The article in the Tennessee, and I think was it today, Chris, this morning, that asked the question about Coach Drew. Could he be fired? Not so much whether you think he should, but do you think that's an actual possibility?
Yeah, I do. For the first time, I think it's possible. I did not think that going into the game last night. I'm not saying they're going to, but I think it's a possibility. And I have not ever thought that at any point until today.
Boy, I would not want to be Malcolm Turner right now. Before we get out of here, I want to ask this: what, he penned a letter to the public that he wants to be, I'd say to the public, but to Vanderbilt Nation, that he wants to be, he wants to be transparent and he wants to be interactive with it. I think that's a huge deal. I hope it's true, and hey, why say it if you're not going to do it? I think it's a pretty decent first step myself. I think that's a positive sign in my mind.
I have a good feeling about him. And I don't know if that means anything. I think this year's shown how much do we really know about anything. But I was in the gym last night. I came over from baseball. And so I was in the building about 2 hours early. I just went to walk around the concourse a couple of times just to stretch my legs. I saw him in the lobby. This was at least an hour before the game, maybe an hour and 15 minutes before the game. He was just kind of out there available for fans to talk to. I saw him talking to a fan or two. It seemed to be like what he was there for was just to meet and greet and say hello. I saw him probably 15 minutes before the game having an extended conversation that was looking pretty lighthearted. He was laughing and cutting up with a couple of fans or boosters or whatever. Had that look of a guy that was really easy to talk to. You had the letter that came out on Wednesday and then backed up by that. Does that speak to his ability to perform? No, but I think that he seriously means the part about wanting to get to know the fan base and interact with them. He sent in that open letter. He sent out his email. And man, David Williams basically just about went dark on communicating with the fan base. Now, I heard that if you send him an email, a lot of times he was very good about responding. I had a lot of fans tell me that, but they had the whole thing about, well, let's have this Q&A session with David on a regular basis. That went away quickly. He just never got out and addressed the public. And I'm not trying to pile on David. It is what it is, but this guy, I think, has taken a very different approach in the limited time that he has been here, and I think that's going to serve him really well. I think it is really resonating with the fan base that, frankly, got sick of not being communicated with.
I'm liking it so far. I mean, I know it's infant stages, but these first few steps, I think, have been pretty positive. I'm kind of with you there. One more thing. I keep saying one more thing before we get out of here, but I keep thinking about stuff. I don't think you and I have had a chance to talk since the combine. First of all, I thought Kyle did himself well. I thought he threw well in drills. I thought he ran well. Yeah, don't get me wrong. 4.92. When you take a look at some of the way these defensive linemen and linebackers were running, would scare the heck out of anybody. But they were running faster than almost all the quarterbacks. But I thought that 4.92 for Kyle, for a guy who's been notoriously immobile, I thought it was pretty darn good, and I thought he was pretty accurate during the drills.
I have always heard, and this was consistent even when he was not playing well in the season, that the NFL liked him more than people suspected.
I could see that. I mean, beyond the lineage too, because I don't think that's fair if we just say that it's about the lineage, because I don't think that's the case. I think he's got a shot. Do I think he's a starting quarterback in this league? I'm not so sure about that. I think he's got a future in this league for sure, and potentially he could be a starter somewhere down the line. But I thought he did himself pretty well last week in Indy. And then there's Juwan Williams. The measurables were fantastic. I mean, good grief, he's almost 6'4". I know a lot of people were a little bit concerned about the 40 time, but it's like I posted on the board, Chris, and I'll just say this when it comes to that. I know that he ran a 4.6, Chris,
but he's also almost 6'4" with length, and that will make up for a step or two here and there. His versatility, we saw some of the plays that he was making, change of direction. He's got it. Would I have liked to have seen a 4.5? Yeah. I think it would have possibly bucked him into that first round, but honestly, I think he was a second-round pick anyway. I don't think he did himself any disservices with that 4.6 because the length will make up for that. That's what I think.
Well, if he runs a 4.45, I think he's a first rounder, don't you?
If he runs a 4.45 first rounder, yeah. I mean, he would just have to. Yeah, he'd simply have to. He'd probably hit the, somewhere in the mid-20s, something like that. For myself, I didn't say that right. For myself, I've had him as a second-round pick, before the combine. And I didn't see anything there that changed my mind. But, yeah, you're right. If he gets into 4.4s at nearly 6'4" as a cornerback, then, yeah, when you have no choice, because at that point you're saying, okay, if this guy played at Ohio State, he might be one of the top 5 picks if he's 6'4", running a 4.4 as a true corner.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but I thought they both did just fine. I think Juwan goes in the second round. The one thing I cannot gauge, though, I don't know about you, is I don't know where Kyle goes. I don't think he's going in the first 3 rounds or anything like that. But I don't think he's a 7th rounder either. I mean, what are we thinking here, Chris? 5th round pick, maybe 5th, 6th?
Yeah, 5th's what I've been thinking before you even said anything. So that's consistent with what I thought.
Okay. All right, man, let's do it, baby. Fire it up. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for that draft. Which, by the way, the information behind all that, the draft, as far as the draft goes, just has been so hard to come by. From what I'm understanding, and you tell me if this is right or wrong, because I don't know. Is this right that it's going to be free
to get into the draft in Nashville?
What I'm understanding is somewhere what I read a story in the Tennessee, and what it looked like, if I understood it correctly, there's an area around First Avenue. I don't know my way all that well around Nashville. First Avenue around the river. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That there's supposed to be some area that they're expecting about 100,000 people there.
Well, they did that in Chicago and wherever else they've had the draft in recent years. They had like this public gathering space where fans could come. I'm not surprised they're doing that here too.
Well, now in Chicago, I know they had it in like that opera house on that college campus. They also had the open part to it, but to get inside that building, the tickets, me and 3 of friends were going to go for the opening round, and it was going to be $10,000 for 4 tickets.
What?
Yes, we went online to get tickets. 4 tickets for the first round. It was $10,000. But it was inside that building, but it didn't have a whole lot of seats, so that's why the prices were as high as they were. I'm trying to find out if the free means there's an area where you can go that's not the actual stage where they walk up with the commissioners and whatnot, and you can see it or not. So if any of our listeners on the podcast has the answer to that, because they have been they just haven't doled out the information the way that we need to, with less than, what are we, 49 days away from the draft from today, 7 weeks from tonight is the draft, and people are still trying to figure out how in the world they can get tickets to this. But if I'm understanding this correctly, this thing's free.
You can get into a Super Bowl cheaper than you can get into the draft, apparently.
The draft has become a traveling rock show, Chris. It really has. The best thing in the history of that draft was when they took it out of Radio City Music Hall, because it was just another year in the draft. Then they hit the road in Philly and put almost 100,000 people in that park, and they tear it up in Chicago. And last year in Dallas, wasn't it close to 250,000 people last year? For that weekend. I mean, and it's just become this huge party. And Nashville, I guarantee you, I love you, Music City. They're going to represent big time. It's going to be great. It's going to be epic. And I'm going to be there, but if I understand correctly, I think it might be free.
I'm hoping to get a press pass and go to that sucker.
See, I don't want one. I don't want one because I'm gonna paint my whole body blue. I'm gonna have a big white horseshoe hanging off my head. Sorry, Titans fans, I love you, but I'm a Colts fan of 46 years. I'm just going all out, man. I'm gonna live this draft experience. It's my favorite sporting event. I've never been, and I doubt it'll ever be anywhere near Nashville again in my lifetime. So I'm taking full advantage of this, and I'm just going to have a party. I don't want to have no restrictions on me that comes with press credentials. Man, Honest to goodness, more than likely, I'll end up in a Nashville jail before it's all said and done during the draft.
Can we do a podcast from there?
Heck yeah. 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 As a matter of fact, I'll use my one call to do the podcast.
Could be like Seabass's Folsom Prison Blues.
Please deposit 50 cents.
Oh,
I love you, Commodore Nation, man. I'm sorry I've been a buzzkill these last 2 weeks. I don't want to be, but it's only because I love these programs at this school so much, man. I'm hearing myself talking. I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, dude, come on. But I don't know what else to say, Chris. You know what I mean? I just don't know what else to say.
you always find a way to say something. We had this off-mic conversation for a long time where you're like, I don't think I can even do a podcast because there's nothing to talk about.
Well, and let me tell you something. Look, I've been doing radio for 19 years, and I have never, ever been in that situation. And to think that the one subject that I would be stumped on would be Vanderbilt, I mean, you could have got every dime I ever made. But that's where I'm at right now. Something's got to happen. So something just has to happen, and I don't mean any harm to anybody, but I mean, I don't think you can run that same situation out the Memorial Gym next year and expect anybody to be there.
All right, my man, where can they find you online? Where can they listen to your show?
Man, you can find me at a local bar drowning my sorrows away. Not really. I'm just kidding. All the places you can find me on the radio at 101.5 FM in Jackson, Tennessee, and at Twitter at Cheap Seats Bass.
He is Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We'll catch you again with more new episodes next week.